What's up, everybody? Welcome to Cinema Trip Reviews. I am Wyatt, and today in the show, I'm going to be talking about the Holdovers. If you haven't already, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Go check us out on Twitter and Instagram, and also wherever you get your podcasts. Drop in and leave us a good review. So like I mentioned today, I'm going to be talking about the Holdovers. This movie is directed by Alexander Payne. I haven't really seen a lot of his movies. I do know the ones that stick out to me are Sideways, About Schmidt, and Election. I did see Election a long time ago. I have heard a lot of different things about Schmidt and a lot of amazing things about Sideways. Sideways has always been one of those movies that's been on my list to watch. I just never really got around to watching it. But, you know, it has Paul Giamatti in it. Big fan of his. I definitely need to check it out because it is, of course, one of his biggest movies, the one that he's really well known for, you know. Coming up to release of this movie towards the end of last year, I was seeing some trailers for it when I was going in the movies. It did look really funny, and it kind of had somewhat of a retro feel to it based off of the trailer, and boy, was I right, and that is one of the things I really loved about this flick. It really leans into the retroness of the movie. I believe this movie is set in 1970, and I mean, it hits you right at the very beginning. I mean, you're getting a lot of these old school credits sequences at the beginning, and you even have like the old school rated R banner that's up there before the movie even starts, and just even down to the credits and just a lot of the film grain that they added on there. And I guess they really wanted to shoot this movie on old school film to kind of give you that grittiness, but the way a lot of the film stock is nowadays is just way too clean. They didn't have that grittiness that they were looking for, so they actually went and did it digitally and then just threw a couple filters on there, and they gave you that grittiness, and you really couldn't really tell the difference. Because while I was watching it, I was like, damn, did they really film this on film? Like, that would have been awesome. Like, you know, I'm a sucker for the old school retro type feels, so having like the old school, like, kind of like, I wouldn't say like burn marks, but the old school kind of like dirt on the film and grain that's in there, that's kind of present throughout the film. But on the movie itself, this does star Paul Giamatti as Paul Hunnam. Dominic Sessa in his first, as of now, breakout role. Everybody's talking about him. He does a fantastic job, as I'm going to be talking about here shortly. You have Divine Joy Randolph as Mary Lamb, who, as amazing as she is in this movie, I feel like she was still underused in some way, but I'll get to more of that here in a second. So the movie pretty much revolves around all three of these characters, more so on Paul and Angus and their relationship as it goes through, but I would say the main character of the movie is Angus, played by Dominic Sessa. Angus is he's a student at this boarding school. I'm not really sure what grade they really say he's in. I'm assuming he's like a junior or maybe a senior or something. As you come to find out, he's kind of a problem child a little bit. He's been kicked out of 3 other schools previously, and this is the last one. He keeps mentioning if he gets kicked out of this one, they're going to send him to like a military school at some point. But a lot of people kind of classify this as a Christmas movie because it takes place over the course of Christmas break. And that's where the title of the movie comes in, The Holdovers, is because over those 2-week long break between like over Christmas leading up to the New Year and everything, the students at the boarding school get a chance to go home and see their families. But for those who don't, that aren't able to leave and go visit their families, they have to stay at the boarding school, and those are called the holdovers. And they have to stay there, and they're under the supervision of one of the teachers that actually gets assigned to stay at the boarding school for those 2 weeks. And unfortunately for this movie, over the course of this break, it is Paul Hunnam, which is Paul Giamatti's character, who... he's one of the teachers that has been around for a long ass time at this school. He went to school there when he was younger, grew up, went to Harvard, ended up becoming a teacher there, and he is a hard ass. And this boarding school is not just any boarding school, it is for the super wealthy. This is for the super wealthy. There are some kids that get in on like scholarships or whatnot here and there or whatever, but this is mostly for like the super wealthy, from what you understand. And Paul Hunnam is such a hard ass type of teacher and such an old school type of teacher. He has integrity. He's going to stick by his core values, and that means failing a lot of kids if their work isn't up to snuff. Doesn't matter who they are, how much money they have. It doesn't matter if their parents are donating a ton of money to the school or are legacies within the school. He doesn't care. He's gonna fail them anyway. He's gotten in trouble for it before. And it seems like every single kid in this school, no matter what generation you look at, hates this teacher because of he's such a hard ass. So Angus is supposed to go home and see his mother for the holidays. Unfortunately, that ends up falling through. He has to stay as a holdover, I believe, with 5 other kids. And of course, Paul Giamatti's character, Paul, has to, stay there for the 2 weeks. of course, he was going to be staying there anyway because he lives on campus, but now he has to watch over these kids. And from the trailers and whatnot, you know that there's going to be some sort of rift and then type of bonding experience between, Paul and Angus. And you really don't know too much about these other kids. Whenever you start watching the movie and you see the dynamic between them, you kind of wonder if it's going to be kind of like a similar, like a Breakfast Club type of thing. These wacky kids are going to be causing all types of antics, and Paul Giamatti's character is going to have to go out and be the hard ass, but then he's going to have the heart of gold, and, they're all going to end up coming together and relating with each other, and all end up being cool by the end of the movie. And it does kind of start off that way. And, Paul is such an asshole, even during, these kids are on a break now. They're not supposed to be, doing schoolwork or whatever. They're supposed to be enjoying their winter vacation. But this dude has them like doing schoolwork, doing study. He has them on a strict schedule every single day. And of course, because of all these schedules, it just pisses all of these kids off. And it seems like there's a wide range gap because, you do have Angus and a lot of the other couple older kids. And then you have like two like real younger kids where they don't seem like they would be in high school. So I don't know how many grades are within this boarding school or how big this fucking boarding school is. But it must be pretty damn huge. But as you come to find out with Angus's character, he is kind of a problem child because of what's going on at home. He always keeps looking at this picture of whenever he was younger of him and his mom and his dad. He has to stay as a holdover because of this fight with his mom. His mom has a new husband now. She's out, gallivanting around with her new husband. And, she has to break the news. Yeah, we're not going to be home. We're finally going on our honeymoon. And he's like, well, you've had like 6 months to go on your honeymoon. Like, you promised we were going to hang out, go to Boston or whatever, do stuff together. And then, of course, she ends up bailing on him. So you find out he has a lot of troubles with home. And, of course, they go far deeper than what you find out at the beginning of the movie. So the third main character of the movie, Mary Lamb, she is the head cook of the boarding school, I believe. But she had a child that just died in the war. And he actually grew up. He went to that school while she was working there and everything. Everybody loved her son. And then you find out she has an even more depressing story on top of it because her husband ended up dying, whenever her son was really young and whatnot. So this lady has been through her whole life. And at the very beginning and throughout this movie, she's really just dealing with grief. She's trying to learn how to grieve over her, her lost son. And this is the first Christmas without her son. And I cannot even imagine how heartbreaking that is. And that's really the driving force of her character through the movie, is just trying to come to terms with her son being gone and connecting with her family at one point in the movie. I feel like they could have done a lot more with her because, the scenes that she has in there are hard hitting. They're fantastic. She does a phenomenal job in this role. I just wish there was a little bit more for her to do there. I just wish they gave that character a little bit more time to breathe and could have fleshed it out a little bit more. Because a majority of this movie just really revolves around Angus and Paul. She's in there a decent bit. She does interact with them a majority of the time because other than those two, she's the only adult at the boarding school. She's the one that's cooking the food every day. She's really the only person that Paul can really connect with. And I really love those scenes where it's like late at night and she's up watching TV and he sneaks out of his room and he goes and watches TV and drinks with her. And you find out that Paul does have some sort of a drinking problem a little bit. But a majority of this movie is just Angus and Paul butting heads back and forth, trying to come to terms, trying to find some sort of things that they may have in common, or just finding more about each other and then, kind of have a little bit more compassion for one another or where they're coming from. Because, of course, to Paul, Angus is just, a wealthy, rich kid, a snotty brat that, has everything handed to him in life, when that's really not the case at all. And in fact, it's pretty much like the complete opposite in a way. Angus is going through a lot of stuff. And of course, nobody really knows much about Paul because he doesn't let anybody in. He has never been married in his life. He doesn't really want to connect with anybody. Like he says in the movie, he likes being alone. Throughout the course of this movie, a lot of the best parts are where they start to connect in some way. My favorite part of the movie is when they finally hit it off. They start kind of becoming friends and bonding again. Angus convinces them to go to Boston, and they have a great time going to Boston. They end up going to museums and stuff, walking around. But it's just like those types of bonding moments that really work. But none of this works without those amazing performances by Paul Giamatti and Dominic Sessa, because they're absolutely fantastic throughout the whole thing. And I love just like the different callbacks that you have throughout the whole movie, like a Barton man never lies, and then of course they keep calling back because there's one point that Angus has to lie to get out of a situation, and then there's another part where Paul has to lie when he's like confronted by one of these classmates from back in the day, and about like what he's doing nowadays because this other guy is super successful. So Paul has to, kind of lie to make it seem like he's successful as well, where he's really just back teaching at the academy where he started. Another scene I really love is when they end up going to Boston and they end up having a dinner with Mary and Paul and Angus. And, Angus wants to have like this, cherry jubilee or whatever it is. And it has like alcohol on it or whatever. So they can't serve him that dessert that he wants. So they end up like getting all the separate ingredients and going out in the parking lot and making it themselves. And they have to light it on fire and they don't know how to put the damn thing out. So they end up like throwing it on the ground. But it's just like those types of moments where you get to really see these characters actually bond and interact and whenever they've been butting heads the whole time. Now Mary hasn't really been butting heads with them, but she's been going through her own thing, of course, with her, trying to process the death of her child. They've been kind of helping her grieve in a way as well, especially Paul's character. Now I really like this movie, but I do have like kind of conflicting issues in a way, where this movie was like, maybe I believe it was like 2 hours and 10 minutes or so. I definitely think this could have been cut down just based off of the content in the movie and what the movie's about. It's very easy to summarize. I feel like it didn't need to be over 2 hours long, but at the same time, I kind of needed them to flesh Mary's character out a little bit more if they wanted to include her in there. And maybe just a couple other things that they try to introduce as well. Like this Christmas party that they end up going to, Paul is kind of has a thing for the girl that invites him that works at the works at the school and everything. And he has a thing for her. And you kind of assume that maybe he's going to kind of shoot his shot at some point. And, they're really hitting it off, having great conversation and whatnot. And then she ended up going and answering the door. And you find out like she has, I believe, like a boyfriend or a husband. She greets him and starts kissing him and whatnot. And you see that disappointment on Paul's face. And you really feel for him, like, man, shut down. When you really thought that, like, man, if maybe he can go out, maybe he can get, hook this one. Maybe he can actually find a girl in his life. Unfortunately not. And then you have Angus, who actually, kind of starts, hitting it off with that lady's niece, and you think that's going to go somewhere, but then you never hear about her ever again, and you never see him kind of get in touch with her, where like maybe it would have been nice to see him kind of try to reach out with this girl. I'm not saying have a love interest for him throughout the movie or anything like that, but I'm saying like have it connect again in some way. Like maybe she comes back at the end of the movie and they hit it and they actually start dating or something. Now, the other two kind of gripes I have with the movie is, one is their reason to put Angus alone with Paul and Mary in this school, because you do start out with like 4 or 5 other kids that go to that school that are holdovers. And one is so rich that his father has he talks about his father having this helicopter and they're supposed to go skiing and whatnot, but he didn't take him because he didn't cut his hair, because he has super long hair. He looks like a hippie or whatnot. And, it's 1970. The father doesn't like it, wants his hair cut, or else he wasn't going skiing. But of course, as fathers do, as parents do to the kids, sometimes they end up giving in. And I believe it's like a couple days into the holdover, you just have this helicopter just fly in and just gonna come and pick up his son and just take him, on vacation for those 2 weeks. And the kid ends up convincing him to take everybody else that is, going to be holdover for those 2 weeks, as long as they have parents' permission. And Paul's able to contact everyone's parents to get permission except for Angus's mom, because she's just out and about doing stuff with her new husband. They can't get a hold of her or anything. So all of these other kids just get to go get on this helicopter and go to this, ski vacation with one of these other students. It just kind of seems a little maybe too far-fetched in a way. Just like this dude just flies down on this helicopter like, yeah, I'm gonna pick up my kid. Oh, you have 5 other, strangers I've never met that you're not friends with that want to come? Sure, bring them all along. We're just going to take them on vacation, whatever. I don't know. It just didn't really make much sense to me. I didn't believe it. I just like, okay, that was kind of a weird way to just have it. Why didn't you just make Angus the only one that was held over in the first place this whole time? I feel like it would have been much more believable than that, and just have, this rich dude just come in and just take all these other kids out just so Angus and, you could have the rest of the movie where Angus has to bond with Paul and Mary. I just feel like they could have came up with a better reason for that. Same with towards the end of the movie here. And I'm going to get into some heavy spoilers here. As you come to find with Angus, his troubled backstory does go further than just his mom, getting a divorce and, marrying some rich guy, that, they're going off and having adventures together. And she just really doesn't want to spend time with her son because, as Angus believes, he reminds her of his father. And while they were in Boston, the whole reason that Angus wanted to go to Boston secretly, because he didn't want to tell Paul he was going to sneak away to do this, he wanted to go visit his father. And Paul's like, hell, man, all you had to do is just tell me. You don't have to sneak away. Like, they went to a movie, and during the movie, he's like, yeah, I got to go to the bathroom. And he was just going to fucking peace out and leave Paul in the movie theater by himself, which was kind of an asshole thing to do. But Paul's like, hey, man, all you had to do is just fucking tell me. I could take you. It's just a cemetery. I don't have any problem with cemeteries. You can go visit your dad. Because you believe his father's out of the picture. His father's dead this whole time. No, his father's actually at a mental institute because he had like a psychotic breakdown and he doesn't really remember who anybody is. Paul takes Angus to see his father, and it's so heartbreaking because Angus has this whole conversation like, Dad, I missed you. I really wanted to see you. I'm doing really well in school. And he's just kind of pouring his heart out to his dad. And then his dad, you feel like he's going to say something. He's going to have this bonding moment, this emotional moment with his son. And he just kind of just talks about random stuff that has nothing to do with it. And you really sense that there's nothing going on in his head. He's not processing any of this. He doesn't even really recognize who his son is. And it's such a heartbreaking scene, man. And I think it was such a twist because, of course, I assume watching the movie that, his father's dead. And it was an interesting twist to have him just be in a mental institute. And you kind of see where those problems with Angus lies because during the course of this trip, Paul finds out that, Angus takes antidepressants, and not only just antidepressants, the same kind that he gets prescribed as well. So that's another common thing they share is just they both are depressed beings that have troubled past. And my real issue with them, and I don't have a real issue with Paul's dad being having a psychotic breakdown and being in a mental institution or whatever. My real issue comes with kind of towards the end of the movie here, because as they go back to school and the break's over and everything, Angus's mom comes to the school pissed off because she finds out that Paul took Angus to see his father when he wasn't supposed to. Angus was not supposed to go see his father. Apparently, it set his father off. He wanted to get out of the mental institution. Paul even stole a snow globe and gave it to him. He tried to use it as a weapon, apparently, and tried to hit one of the orderlies with it or whatever. And they have to end up moving him out of that institution, even though it was hard enough getting him in there in the first place. And it just caused a whole mess and everything. And they're talking about pulling Angus out of school and putting him in the military academy. It is a great scene because Paul Giamatti has a decent monologue where it really just shows how much he has grown to care for Angus and realize the potential that he has and how much shit that he has gone through and how much he has to, live with his mother being how she is. And just has a great moment where he just calls him out on everything. He ends up giving his job up just so Angus could stay there at the academy and finish it out and go to college and whatnot. And I feel like it didn't need to be like that. I feel like each character was kind of heading towards some redemption in some way, because each character between Mary, Angus, and Paul, each character throughout the movie kind of has their own kind of standalone moment where they're kind of going through something and reflecting on something a little bit. And you kind of have their kind of standalone moment, which I think is nice. That was a kind of a decent aspect of the movie where you kind of have a big emotional moment for each character in this movie. And Mary's is so sad because she's just breaking down at this Christmas party in the kitchen because she had too much to drink, and the song, and she was in charge of the music, and the song she puts on just reminds her of her kid because they used to dance to it whenever he was younger and whatnot. And she just ends up breaking down, and then, Paul and Angus have to help her out, and they take her home. Paul ends up having his emotional moments, whether it's, seeing that he didn't have, he didn't have a wife. He didn't have someone that to be there his whole life. And back whenever he was in school, somebody accused him of cheating, even though that person was cheating off of his paper and whatnot. And he ends up getting so mad, he ends up hitting the guy with the car, gets kicked out of, college and whatnot, has to, and it, kind of puts a blemish on his career. That's why he ends up going back and teaching at the school. And Paul didn't really grow from there. I mean, he didn't go out and explore the world or have a great life. He's been stuck teaching at this school, which he's dedicated his whole life to. He loves the school more than anything because that's all he's really known because of what happened whenever he was younger. I wish we could have had some sort of redemption for him. I guess you can kind of say he does because because he's fired, he does have the ability to have a free start to go out and do whatever he wants. But he still has the blemish of what happened when he was younger, and then also getting fired at this school, I feel like that's not going to look good on his record as well if he's trying to go out and get a job, if getting fired from that academy. I just feel like they could have did it a little different. Like they made the mom just such a villain, just coming out. Like the only time you see her in a movie, she's just throwing a fit because Paul took her son to go see his father. And he's like, well, a son deserves to see his father. It's Christmas. He should at least see one of his parents, right? But it just seemed a little over the top just for like the mother to do that and whatnot. I don't know. I just feel like it could have been done a little differently. I'm not sure that he really needed to lose his job in the end because it is sad. I mean, you had a guy that, is finally starting to come out of his shell, starting to connect with a guy, and then he loses his job. And then he's just out on his own all by himself. He doesn't have a home. He doesn't really have anywhere to go. It kind of screws over Paul's character in the end. I mean, Angus, he can continue to be at the school. He can grow, eventually go to college and end up making something of himself. But he still lost that person that kind of grounded him a little bit, that made him see reality and kind of made him see what he is in a way. And I mean, through the course of this movie, there's so much growth, I feel like, between all three of these characters. But by the end, I feel like they don't really go anywhere. It doesn't really have any payoff, if that makes any sense. Like, Mary is still working at the academy. I mean, she did end up bonding with her sister. She ended up, like, giving her, of course, her child's, like, old baby clothes to her sister because her sister's having a baby and whatnot. So she gets to bond with her family and that kind of helps her a little bit. And also being with, Paul and Angus and them being so kind to her and everything. She's still, like, kind of right back where she started at the beginning of the movie. I mean, I guess she's kind of grieved and kind of coped with her son being gone a little bit because it's past the holidays. But you don't really see too much of Mary towards the end of the movie. It's more so about Paul and Angus. Then that's why, and that's the reason I feel like they should have maybe given her more to do or kind of fleshed out her character a little bit more, because it seems like she's just right back to where she started. And with Angus, he realizes what Paul did for him. He gave up his job for him. He thanks him and everything, and he realizes he can't blow this chance that he has now. This is his second chance at this place. He's got to make the most of it. Go out, succeed, graduate, go off to college, and make something of himself. But he lost that guy that he was kind of connecting with that grounded him. So how's he going to grow going forward? Or who's going to be there to help him grow going forward, I'm interested in that. And then, of course, with Paul's character, he ends up getting fired. He does say that he has some place to take his stuff, but he doesn't really have any jobs lined up or any place to live. The only one that really, really, really gets gypped at the end is Paul Giamatti's character, Paul. I mean, he gave up his whole life just to keep Angus in this school and everything. And I guess he kind of has a fresh start as well. He gets to pretty much have his big fuck you moment to his boss, which I'm sure, in which, everybody wants to have that big fuck you moment to your boss at some point, right? Everybody kind of just hopes they could have that moment, and relish in it. But I mean, of course he relishes in it. He even just fucking takes that big ass expensive bottle of, liquor that he stole from his boss's desk, takes a big swig of it and spits it out on the ground on his way out as he's driving away. I just wish there was a better payoff. And that's where it sounds really nitpicky because the ending isn't what I wanted, and that's just my opinion. I think it was a very good movie nonetheless. I think it was very good. And I just wish that, they could have found a way that he didn't get fired and he could have stayed out to school. That way that Angus and him could have helped each other throughout how many years that Angus has left at the academy. They could have kind of helped each other grow throughout that time, since they developed that bond and that friendship. It sucks to see it kind of just, cut away and drifted apart at the very end. They're kind of separated. They're not going to have that bonding moment. Angus is always going to have that memory of Paul because, Paul has done so much for him, and that's kind of going to be his driving force to succeed going forward. Whereas Paul, he's much older than Angus. He has to go off and start anew at a pretty old age. He has to find a new job. I think the third act could have been just written a little bit better, or just a little bit more concise, or a little bit more planned out. Because this kind of seemed a little bit messy as far as them firing Paul, the mother just coming in and having this story about the whole story about the father just flying off the handle at the mental institution and her having to move him. It just kind of seemed weird and just seemed so out of place given everything else that happened in the movie. Even though I liked the twist of the father being in a mental institution, I think it may have worked out better still if he maybe would have been dead in a way. Because the mother still could have been pissed off that Paul took Angus to the grave site or what have you. She still could have been mad about him, taking him out of the school and whatnot. You still could have had all of that. I just feel like it was weird to have the whole, mental institution and then him like flying off the handle and then the mother saying, yeah, we got to move him, whatever. It just felt so out of place given the rest of the movie felt so realistic and grounded. That just kind of seemed out there, as well as, the one kid's father just coming and picking up everybody in the chopper and, peacing out. It was just those only two moments that kind of made me feel like just felt out of place given the rest of the movie. But I really fucking enjoyed this movie. I was locked in the entire time. I was very intrigued where they were going to take these characters, even though you kind of know where it's going to go by the end of the movie. Like, yeah, they're going to be button heads throughout the whole movie, and then there's going to be that turning point where they become friends. They start getting along, they start growing and learning from each other. And that is exactly what happens. But I was along for the whole ride along the way. I was drawn in. The writing was very good for the most part, just, with those couple exceptions that I mentioned. It was very well shot, had a lot of great kind of retro, 70s cinema, angles, just felt so retro, along with that film grain and, filters they put on top of it as well. I just love the old school, like 70s retro aesthetic that they brought to the movie, and I wish more movies would do that as well. But, the performances were fantastic throughout. The music was great as well, because I'm a sucker for like those types of indie movies where like the slow guitar, acoustic guitar, soft songs that are playing, and it just brings those emotional moments and the drama out in these indie flicks so well, and I absolutely love it. The one I think of the most when it comes to that is Away We Go, where it has Maya Rudolph and John Krasinski in it. Great movie. I fucking love it. It has an amazing soundtrack by Alexi Murdoch. If you haven't seen the movie or listened to that album, 100% go check it out. It's one of my faves. But that's kind of what I meant as far as like indie music. And this movie does music absolutely amazing in this. It feels like 70s classic rock, soft stuff, and it's it's fantastic. It goes with the movie very well. And a couple other things before I go, I thought the movie was going to be a lot funnier than it actually is. There are some funny moments in there sprinkled throughout the movie, but the trailer kind of gives off like this movie is a comedy / drama, where it's more of a drama than a comedy. There is comedy sprinkled throughout the movie, but it's not heavy as kind of the trailer implies. The funniest moment in the movie for me, of course, like they show in the trailers, when Angus is just running from Paul throughout the school, just egging him on, yelling at him, and then they go into the gym where they're not allowed to go, and he just runs and jumps off that springboard, and he ends up like dislocating his shoulder, and he's screaming bloody murder in this gym. And just that face that Paul Giamatti has on, and just that weird wonky eye that he fucking has that just keeps flip-flopping like it's Igor's hump in Young Frankenstein, where it switches sides every couple scenes or so. It happens in this movie. I noticed like halfway through, this dude's fucking wonky eye just keeps going back and forth from one eye to another, and it's just like, I didn't notice until halfway through, and I was like, holy shit, that the fucking weird eye just keeps moving. I don't know how they did it, but they did an amazing job with it. I didn't know if it was actually Paul Giamatti or if it was some kind of fucking special effect. It was weird. It was really cool though. It was really funny. But yeah, I really enjoyed this flick. All the hype that this movie is getting is very well deserved. It was very well put together. It was very well directed. The cinematography is fantastic. The music fantastic, and even more so, the performances are fantastic. Anytime you have a drama movie like this, you need the performances to carry that movie, or else it just gets flat out boring. And this movie, not boring at all in my opinion. Maybe some people may think that, but these performances made the movie, especially Paul Giamatti's character. Out of a buy it, rent, or miss it, I would say a rent it. I don't know if I'm actually going to add this one to my collection anytime soon. I know a lot of people are saying this is maybe like a every year Christmas type viewing. I don't think I'm going to be watching this every single Christmas or anything like that. This may be one that I come back to eventually or from time to time. But, this is not one I want to be adding to my collection. But this is one I definitely recommend going out and checking out. But that is the show for this week. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Go check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Cinnamon Trip Reviews. Also, wherever you get your podcast, drop in and leave us a good review there as well. And I'll see everybody next week.